The studio lights flared to life as the camera panned across the stage of American Discourse Live, a primetime political roundtable infamous for throwing unlikely guests into unscripted debates. Seated on opposite ends of the sleek glass table were Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General turned conservative firebrand, and Robert De Niro, the legendary actor whose outspoken liberal stances had made him a favorite on the late-night circuit. The air bristled with anticipation before a single word was said. Moderator Carl Benson barely finished his introduction before De Niro leaned in, his voice already rising with indignation. "Pam, you represent everything that's wrong with this country. Authoritarianism wrapped in a fake smile." Bondi smiled coolly, brushing off his remark like lint on a blazer. "And you, Robert, are the poster child for Hollywood elitism, drunk on your own applause and pretending that makes you an expert on policy." The studio gasped. The crowd, split in allegiance, erupted into nervous laughter and murmurs. De Niro scoffed. "You think enforcing archaic laws and supporting tyrants makes you a patriot? You don't know the first damn thing about real America?" Bondi's eyes flickered with steel. "I lived real America, Robert, not in a penthouse suite or behind a velvet rope. When I stood in courtrooms prosecuting criminals, you were playing mobsters in front of a green screen." His smirk cracked for a split second. The conversation swerved into immigration. De Niro, pounding the table for emphasis, barked, "We're a nation of immigrants. The Statue of Liberty doesn't hold a deportation notice." Bondi's voice cut through his as she leaned forward. "And we're also a nation of laws, Robert. You don't get to pick and choose which ones feel good at cocktail parties in Tribeca." She turned toward the audience. "Tell me, do you lock your doors at night? Is that xenophobia or common sense?" De Niro's face turned crimson. "That's fear-mongering and you know it. You make policy decisions that hurt people and then twist it into patriotism." "You lie, Pam. You lie for a living." Bondi didn't flinch. "You pretend, I protect. That's the difference between you and me." The air between them pulsed. Carl Benson tried steering the conversation to criminal justice reform, but Bondi didn't wait. "You condemned law enforcement for political points while real officers bled in the streets. You act like every police badge is a villain in your next film. That's not activism, Robert. That's narcissism wrapped in guilt." De Niro stood halfway from his chair, jabbing his finger. "You're disgusting. How dare you question my motives when people like you gaslight the entire country into thinking empathy is weakness?" Bondi rose too, slow and deliberate. "Empathy isn't weakness. Weaponizing it for applause is." What followed next was unscripted and unfiltered chaos. The segment turned personal. De Niro mocked Bondi's past legal controversies with a snide, "Funny how morality comes easy to someone who's never had to account for her own skeletons." Bondi fired back without blinking. "The difference is, I faced mine in court, not under a blanket of Oscars and press agents." The crowd shifted again. Whispers rose. Pam pointed directly at him. "Let me ask you something, Robert. Where were you when inner-city crime spiked, hiding behind your gated community while calling cops fascists on Twitter?" De Niro snapped. He slammed his hand on the table. "You want to talk about crime? Your party worships criminals when they wear suits and donate to super PACs." Bondi, calm and methodical now, pulled out a stack of printed tweets and interviews. "Your hypocrisy is as loud as your film scores," she said, waving them in the air. "You called Trump a threat to democracy, yet defended Roman Polanski's art. You lecture about virtue, but you excuse predators when they're your kind of genius. Isn't that right?" That hit like a freight train. The room fell silent. De Niro's jaw tightened, eyes wild with fury. He rose to his full height, voice trembling. "You're vile. You twist truth into venom. This is why people hate politics, because of manipulators like you." Bondi didn't move. "No, Robert. They hate hypocrisy, and tonight, they saw it unmasked. By now, the segment had derailed into a televised inferno. De Niro, red-faced and visibly shaken, tried to regain control. "You think you've won because you yell louder?" Bondi shook her head. "I don't need to yell. Your meltdown did the heavy lifting." She turned toward the camera, letting her voice drop to a calm, chilling tone. "The difference between us, Robert, is I don't pretend to be perfect. But I sure as hell don't pretend to be oppressed while vacationing in the Hamptons." De Niro's mouth moved, but the words didn't come. A producer off stage signaled to Carl, but the moderator was frozen, stunned like everyone else. Suddenly, an audience member stood up, a Vietnam veteran in full uniform. "With all due respect, Mr. De Niro," the man said, voice booming, "you lost the argument the second you shouted instead of answered." The camera caught De Niro's stunned reaction. Then another voice rose. Then another. The murmurs became a ripple, a shift in atmosphere that no script could reverse. De Niro grabbed his earpiece and stormed off stage. His parting words, "This show is a fucking joke," left echoing through the speakers. Bondi stood alone, composed, almost mournful. She turned slowly, stepped off the platform, and whispered to Carl, "That's not how you lose a debate. That's how you burn a legacy." The clip went viral within minutes. But it wasn't Bondi's insults that trended. It was De Niro's face. The moment his confidence cracked and the crowd turned. In the age of sound bites, truth didn't just sting. It shattered. The fallout began before the credits had even rolled. By the time Pam Bondi had left the building, her phone had erupted with dozens of messages. News anchors requesting interviews, conservative influencers calling her a one-woman wrecking ball, and liberal pundits accusing her of orchestrating a takedown. But Bondi didn't respond to any of them. She rode silently in the back seat of a black SUV, watching the clip play on her phone. It was already captioned a dozen different ways. "Bondi eviscerates De Niro. Hollywood has no answers. Pam vs. the Pretender." On the screen, Robert De Niro's final moment played again. His jaw clenching, eyes wild, lips moving soundlessly just before he stormed off. The world wasn't just watching anymore. It was choosing sides. In a Manhattan loft, De Niro sat, with a glass of scotch in hand, the glass trembling slightly against the table. "They set me up," he muttered. "They ambushed me with that pit viper." His publicist hovered nearby, trying to convince him to issue a statement, but De Niro waved her off. "Let them talk," he growled. "Let the internet foam at the mouth. I've survived worse." But he hadn't. Not like this. Not in the age of rewinds, memes, and 4K humiliation. Every late-night show reran the confrontation. SNL was already scripting a cold open. Bondi had turned him into a punchline, and the actor who once reduced entire rooms to silence with a stare now couldn't even hold the internet's sympathy for 10 seconds. The next morning, Bondi was scheduled to appear on Fox and Friends, but she canceled. Instead, she walked into a community law center in Tallahassee, sat down beside a single mother seeking legal advice, and spent the day quietly helping navigate a custody battle. When reporters camped outside asked if she was avoiding the spotlight, she simply said, "I don't need to explain the truth to people who already made up their minds." Meanwhile, De Niro doubled down. He appeared via satellite on MSNBC, eyes bloodshot, voice low and bitter. She didn't win. She just played dirty. That wasn't a debate. It was a smear campaign. But even as he spoke, the viewer numbers dipped. Twitter threads exploded, not with support, but mockery. Old interviews of De Niro defending controversial figures resurfaced. Clips where he dismissed allegations against Hollywood elites began trending under hashtags like selective morality and De Niro deflects. Even progressive voices began to question whether their hero had, in fact, lost the moral high ground. In A single night, Bondi hadn't just confronted a titan. She'd cracked his armor and exposed the hollow beneath. What began as political theater had morphed into a referendum on authenticity, and De Niro, for all his past gravitas, suddenly looked more like an actor out of lines than a champion of truth. Then came the twist no one expected. 3 nights later, at a private gala in D.C., Bondi took the stage to a standing ovation from a conservative donor crowd. But instead of reveling in her victory, she delivered a chilling speech. That night on national television wasn't a victory, she said calmly, looking past the cameras. It was a funeral for civil discourse, for the idea that people can disagree without burning each other alive on camera for ratings. The crowd fell silent. I didn't destroy Robert De Niro, she continued. We did, all of us, when we allowed debate to become blood sport. Murmurs swept through the ballroom. Was she apologizing? No, she was warning. We cheered when he stormed off, laughed at his rage, and crowned me the winner. But what did we really win? We proved that humiliation draws more applause than reason. That performance beats principle. Even her critics were stunned. The clip of her speech, sober, almost sorrowful, spread like wildfire. It reframed everything. Suddenly, Bondi wasn't just the woman who dismantled De Niro. She was the woman who exposed a nation's addiction to conflict theater. And in doing so, she redefined power, not as dominance, but restraint.